The iron bars serve as a stern execution of justice's stringent decree, confining the treacherous and the untrustworthy. Their crimes bear a weight so great that the warmth of the sun and a breath of fresh air will remain out of their reach indefinitely, and the echoes of the offenses they committed will ricochet just the same. Number 10. Born and raised in an unconventional and dysfunctional family system, Katherine Knight was subjected to a violent alcoholic father and a mother who refused to stand up against him and other male family members, and instead, Barbara Rowan would instruct her daughters to simply endure it and stop complaining. This upbringing would undoubtedly have a psychological effect on all the children, Knight being among the most affected. When she was in high school, she was labeled a loner and a bully who loomed over the smaller pupils. At one stage, she'd even assaulted a boy at the school with a weapon. When not in a state of rage, though, Knight was an accomplished model student and earned awards for good behavior. But no amount of education could rid her mind of the pent-up violence, a violence that would follow her to adulthood. As an adult, Knight moved to Aberdeen, New South Wales, where she was noted as a proficient meat worker. Most of the time she upheld this reputation, but was also known to have an incredibly short fuse. That rage would come in her first marriage, when she fractured her husband's skull with a frying pan following a dispute. She also used a pair of scissors against another partner. The warning signs were all there, but the partners she would find herself with thereafter would not heed them. In 1995, John Price and Katherine Knight moved in together, with Price already having 3 children of his own, who seemed to take to his new girlfriend immediately. 3 years into their relationship, the pair would have a dispute over Price's refusal to marry Knight, and in retaliation, she videotaped alleged items that her partner had stolen from work and sent them to his boss. After 17 years of working there, he was fired. That same day, he would kick his girlfriend out of the house, only to rekindle the relationship a few months later. The fighting, though, didn't stop, leading to many of Price's friends having nothing to do with him. Neighbors and coworkers didn't see such drama, and nobody expected it either. But Knight was abusive, and had even attacked her partner with a sharp item, which led to a restraining order. Despite all of this, they reconciled once more. By 2000, Price had started a new job, and in March, it would all come crashing down in a final dramatic act. On the 29th of February that year, Price would tell his coworkers that if he didn't show up to work the day after, they should call the police. At 6 a.m. on the 1st of March, neighbors grew concerned at the sight of the man's car still parked in the driveway, and when he failed to show up for work, coworkers went looking for him. Both coworkers and neighbors tried getting the homeowner's attention, but the red-stained front door compelled them to contact the police. Upon arriving at the home, officers would break down the door, not knowing the gruesome scene that they would be walking into. Inside, Knight was in a self-induced coma, having taken a large amount of sleeping pills, and Price's vital fluid painted the home a new shade of scarlet. Further investigation eventually discovered where the fluid had come from. Hanging upon a recently installed meat hook was a human pelt. Price's exposed torso was found in the lounge, missing a head. Investigators, disturbed by the sight, began to search for the missing body parts. In the kitchen, they found a neatly set table with platters of baked potatoes, carrots, beets, cabbage, squash, gravy, and servings of non-animal meat. A pot, still warm to the touch, sat upon the stove. The lid was lifted with hesitation, but when officers were brave enough to peer inside, they would find the final missing piece staring back at them. Right then, Knight was cuffed, placed in the back of a squad car, and driven to her jail cell, where she awaited a court date. In 2001, a trial would see Knight plead guilty to homicide, and the sentencing that followed would make Australian history. Katherine Knight was the first woman in Australia to ever receive a life sentence without a possibility of parole, never to see the light of day again. Number 9. It was the morning of the 12th of April 2022 when pure havoc disrupted the flow of New York City. From 8:24 a.m. that day, For 29 hours, a city-wide search was underway. Authorities were in search of a man who'd carried out a brazen crime in broad daylight. The man they were looking for was African American, heavyset, with a bald head and dark circles hanging under his eyes. On the 13th of April at 1 p.m., the police finally received that long-awaited tip that would secure a criminal and serve justice. The tip came in from a McDonald's in the East Village, and the caller was none other than the suspect himself, 62-year-old Frank Robert James. Shortly after alerting law enforcement to his location, James ambled off. The day after, at 1:40 p.m., NYPD patrol officers would find their suspect on the corner of St. Mark's Place and First Avenue. He was placed in handcuffs and escorted to the jailhouse. What James had done that fateful day is nothing short of alarming. It highlighted the sheer importance of the need for firearm control. It also traumatized regular commuters, many of whom would seek an alternative way to work thereafter. It was during the morning rush hour when James, wearing construction worker attire, got on a Manhattan-bound subway. Dozens of regular commuters squeezed into the subway car too, not knowing the terror that was about to be unleashed upon them. The assailant drew a Glock 17 pistol and corralled the passengers to the opposite side of the car. He then pulled out smoke grenades and set them off, obscuring everyone's vision. The passengers huddled together in one section and would give him a clear line of fire, and with the semi-automatic extended magazine, James pulled the trigger. The firearm was able to let off a rapid succession of 32 bangs that echoed through the car as the train pulled into Sunset Park Station in Brooklyn. As a result of the wounds, crowd injury, and smoke inhalation, 24 people were hospitalized. Miraculously, none would succumb to their injuries. An investigation revealed that the act, despite what James may say, was premeditated. The assailant suggested that he did not intend to harm anyone and that he was suffering a schizophrenic episode. Though he does have a history of such a diagnosis, James's prior movements and those in the aftermath suggest that this was intentional. Ultimately, James would plead guilty to 11 counts, one for each of the 10 firearm victims, and one for discharging a firearm in a violent crime. He was subsequently sentenced to life in prison. Number 8. Joaquin Guzman, El Chapo, was once one of the most powerful criminals to walk the earth. He was the head of the Sinaloa cartel, the most formidable criminal organization in Mexico of the late 20th century. Guzman was born and raised in an impoverished and remote area of Sinaloa, the birthplace of many notorious traffickers. His criminal career would start out in the Guadalajara cartel, then headed by Miguel Gallardo. It didn't take long for Guzman to rise through the ranks, and when it disbanded in the 1980s, he would become the leader of the Sinaloa criminal organization. Under Guzman's guidance, this craft cartel would develop some seriously creative smuggling techniques and extreme measures. One such measure was the creation of air-conditioned tunnels that run under the Mexico-US border. They managed to get all kinds of narcotics across America by hiding them in chili pepper cans and fire extinguishers. Narcotics, by these methods, could be catapulted into the United States, allowing for an illegal substance crisis to unfold. So powerful was El Chapo that he'd become the head of his empire while he was incarcerated. It was in 1993 when he was arrested and extradited to Mexico, tried, and acquitted on charges of homicide, but he was found guilty of trafficking and possession of firearms, leading to a 20-year sentence in a maximum security prison. Corruption allowed Guzman to exchange bribes for extensive liberties, and the prison guards were happy to oblige. From inside the concrete cage that confined him, El Chapo ran his empire, and in 1995, he was named the leader of the Sinaloa cartel. In 2001, having served 8 years of his sentence, with the aid of prison guards, the criminal escaped. By the early 21st century, Guzman was believed to be responsible for the narcotics that were being trafficked from Colombia and Mexico to the United States. He was also the largest smuggler of those illegal substances, according to investigative reports. Some investigations would suggest that the kingpin had an estimated annual revenue of $3 billion. Guzman became so famous that his rank rose to the level of folklore. He was glorified and considered a hero, but the United States government didn't have such a concept of him. To them, he was a public enemy who needed to be apprehended. For years, he would evade arrest, though he was named a priority target, and even with the substantial $5 million reward that would lead to his arrest, the community remained silent, allowing the cartel's practices to continue until he was finally apprehended again in February of 2014. He'd been hiding out and was tracked down through a weeks-long operation by the DEA and Mexican Marines. This time he was placed in the Altiplano prison, another high-security establishment. Yet, on the night of the 11th of July, 2015, he would make another escape. This time, he didn't need to bribe the guards, but instead fled through a shaft beneath the shower in his cell. The shaft led to a 1-mile-long tunnel that ended at a construction site. For 6 months, the manhunt for El Chapo was on once more, and in January of 2016, he was finally apprehended during an exchange of fire, and he was extradited to the United States, where he'd be charged with various crimes. He saw convictions of trafficking, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit homicide. His trial began in 2018, and by 2019, he was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison, never to escape again. Number 7. In 2020, 54-year-old Metropolitan Police Sergeant Matt Ratana, nearing retirement, was fatally wounded. On September 25th, 23-year-old Luis de Souza was stopped for cannabis possession. Officers missed a hidden antique Colt revolver and ammunition that was on him. Since the custody suite at the Windmill Road in Croydon lacked metal detectors, de Souza got the weapons inside. During a second search, while cuffed behind his back, de Souza produced the revolver and fired, hitting Ratana in the heart and lung. A second shot hit Ratana's leg. A fourth hit de Souza in the neck, causing brain damage. Both were hospitalized, but Ratana passed away, marking the first fatal shooting of a British police officer since 2012. Investigations revealed de Souza had a hidden holster under his arm, missed by arresting officers. Police believe he transferred the revolver to his hands in the police van. Arrested in November of 2020, de Souza was charged with homicide the following June. In April of 2023, he pleaded not guilty, claiming he had Asperger's syndrome and was having a meltdown. Following a Northampton Crown Court trial, de Souza was convicted, though, and given a whole life order, reserved for the most serious of crimes, due to the degree of planning and premeditation that was found. He later appealed, but his appeal was rejected. Number 6. Born in Brooklyn in 1960 to an advertising executive father and a ballroom dance mother, Keith Rainier would follow in neither of their footsteps. After the family moved to Suffern, New York, Rainier would excel in science and math and pursue a higher education in college. After college, he would take up a job as a computer programmer and consultant before launching his own company called Consumer Byline. When regulators investigated that business, though, they discovered that it was a pyramid scheme, and Rainier was required to pay a fine. 8 years later, in 1998, he founded Executive Success Programs, which would later become known as Nexium, a company that would later be tied to violent crimes. The program started off as a self-help executive coaching situation, but it quickly became something far more disturbing. Tucked away within the company was a subgroup known as Dominus Obsequious Sororium, or DOS, a secret cult in which Rainier masqueraded as a self-help guru, calling himself the Vanguard. Those who joined the company unsuspectingly would be manipulated and controlled by Rainier, and eventually form part of his followers. The secret society led the branding of women, with gurus signing his initials on their bodies. This very act alone only underscored the dangers of such cult organizations. The misuse of power, the manipulation, and abuse were hidden under the guise of self-improvement, but little did anyone know what horrors they were getting into. Aside from the outlandish requirement of branding, Women were also forced to record false confessions and provide exposed images to the organization that could be used as blackmail should they choose to become a whistleblower. For the next several years, females of various ages would be roped into the cult, many of whom were trafficked and forced to perform the acts wanted by the vanguard. Physical and psychological punishments dominated the cult, usually enacted upon dissenters. From 1998 until 2017, Rainier's crimes continued until several victims and former members finally exposed the secret. Immediately, an investigation was launched, and that year, investigative journalists reported on the existence of DOS and highlighted the atrocities taking place within. Articles spoke of branding, forced diets, and slavery. Following a public outcry, a criminal investigation was formally launched and opened against Nexium and Rainier. Initially, the guru denied such allegations and was able to make an escape to Mexico, impeding the investigation. But authorities were able to track him down, and in March of 2018, he was finally apprehended. Further investigation, based on the testimonies of victims and former members, would lead to serious charges against Rainier. The charges brought against him included trafficking, attempted trafficking, trafficking conspiracy, racketeering conspiracy, wire fraud conspiracy, and forced labor conspiracy. By June of the following year, Rainier was found guilty on all counts, with the details revealed at his trial only adding more horror to the case. He was sent to prison for life and will never see the light of day again. Number 5. In 1980, the Beatles' co-leader John Lennon was assassinated outside his Manhattan apartment building on December 8th. The assailant, Mark David Chapman, ambushed Lennon and his wife, Yoko Ono, as they returned home. Chapman, who'd met Lennon earlier that day to get an autograph for his Double Fantasy album, fired a .38 Special revolver, hitting Lennon 4 times. Chapman didn't flee, instead sitting nearby to read The Catcher in the Rye. Police quickly arrived, arrested Chapman, and rushed Lennon to Roosevelt Hospital, where he was pronounced deceased at 11:15 p.m. Chapman, a former security guard from Hawaii, was obsessed with the Beatles, and particularly Lennon. He grew unstable and fixated on The Catcher in the Rye, identifying with the main character, Holden Caulfield, a phony slayer who hated hypocrisy. Chapman began making a list of people he wished to take out, including Lennon. He quit his job, bought a gun, and traveled to New York. After an initial hesitation, he returned on December 6th to carry out the crime he had planned for months. Further investigation revealed Chapman sought the glory of taking out Lennon and resented him for perceived hypocrisy, particularly Lennon's remark about the Beatles being more popular than Jesus, which Chapman felt was contradicted by his song God and the lavish lifestyle that seemed to contradict the lyrics of Imagine, such as Imagine No Possessions. Despite a possible schizophrenia diagnosis, Chapman pleaded guilty to second-degree homicide in June of 1981, claiming he was doing the Lord's bidding. He received a sentence of 20 years. Eligible for parole since 2000, he's been denied release 14 times and will have his next hearing in 2027. Number 4. It was 1987 when 2 bodies turned up in Tunbridge Wells, Kent. The victims were 25-year-old Wendy Nell and 20-year-old Carolyn Pierce, subject to 2 separate attacks, slain by an unknown assailant who would go unnamed for several decades. The cases of Nell and Pierce went unavenged, and the community was left struggling to comprehend such a heinous act carried out against 2 innocent individuals. With a lack of advanced technology, the DNA samples taken at the scene were simply stored away, hoping to one day be connected to the felon. It wouldn't be until 2020 when the maniac was revealed to the world, but not before more atrocities would paint his picture, earning him the name Morgue Monster. In 2007, a review of the cold case found that the DNA from the perpetrator matched both crime scenes. This indicated that the 2 separate attacks were in fact connected by one assailant. Despite this breakthrough, though, the owner of said DNA would remain unknown until 2020. When another inquiry into the 3 decades-old case was made, the man behind it all was finally revealed. In December of 2020, 67-year-old David Fuller was placed in handcuffs and escorted to a jail cell. It didn't take long before he was identified as the criminal who took the lives of the 2 women back in 1987. No one knew it at the time, but this case was about to get a lot more disturbing. Not only did Fuller slay these 2 women, but he was also responsible for several other grotesque crimes, which he committed over a 12-year period, and recorded the offenses that would later be used against him in trial. For those 12 years, Fuller was working as an electrician at 2 different hospitals, Kent and Sussex Hospital, located in Tunbridge Wells, and the Tunbridge Wells Hospital itself. It would be at both of these hospitals that he was given an all-access swipe card, allowing him to enter any area he wished to, including the morgue. The morgue would be the crime scene in which Fuller would commit his next 101 crimes against the women who ended up there, and no age group was spared. The disturbed hospital electrician made his way from corpse to corpse, victims who had succumbed to accidents, in the operating theater or from the terminal wards, assaulting them and wreaking unspeakable havoc behind the closed fridge doors. There was no CCTV in the post-mortem room, allowing the dignity of the patients to be preserved. At least, this was the intention. Luckily, there was no need for surveillance footage to convict Fuller of his crimes, because his computer hard drive at his home in Heathfield was evidence enough. 818,051 images and 504 videos highlighted the magnitude of his abuse and his unrelenting interest in abusing and slaughtering women. The morgue monster, aged 71, now sits in a cell alongside Michael Stone and Wayne Couzens, and neither of them will ever see the light of day again. Number 3. On a quiet Monday morning, just before 10 a.m. in May of 2023, emergency responders were called to a devastating scene in Dalton. Upon arriving, 2 bodies, having sustained multiple injuries, lay unmoving in the home. Identifying the pair didn't take much time. They were 25-year-old Stephen Harnett and 27-year-old Katie Higton, a couple who'd recently started dating. Also on the property were 4 of Katie's children who did not witness the crime, but likely heard it unfold as they hid in fear. With no immediate suspects in mind, the police appealed for information, hoping that someone might come forward. Autopsies revealed the harrowing and courageous struggle fought by the victims. Katie sustained 99 wounds to her body, with more than 20 directed at her face, each made with a sharpened weapon. Stephen was subjected to 24 wounds and was left to succumb to them alongside his partner. Several days would pass before police finally drew upon a potential suspect, placing him in custody as an investigation ensued. As the case unfolded, a disturbing, frenzied double homicide would be revealed. It was Katie's ex-boyfriend who caught the detectives' attention. 35-year-old Marcus Osborne had a history of domestic violence, particularly with his first victim. He'd been released on bail just days before the slayings would take place. The most disturbing part of it all was that the victim had told the police that Osborne threatened to take her life, and on that day, just as she was returning home from a date at the cinema, that's exactly what would happen. The merciless attacker forced his way into the Huddersfield home, attacked Katie, and took her life. He then used her phone and Snapchat account to lure his next victim to the scene. Stephen was taken by surprise and slain in mere seconds. Allegedly, Osborne then stated that Romeo and Juliet can now pass away together. It was clear he was overcome with the fit of unhinged jealousy. Following both attacks, he then kidnapped another woman and brought her to the same house where he assaulted her and held her at blade point for the remainder of the evening. Bizarrely, he would also attempt to invite neighbors over to see the bodies. It's uncertain if any of them took him up on the offer. Osborne was found to have several other convictions for violent offenses from 2 other ex-partners. In March of 2024, he pleaded guilty to 2 counts of homicide in the first degree, 1 count of assault, and another of false imprisonment. The trial was held at Leeds Crown Court, where he received a whole life order, never to be released from the iron bars that now contain his uncontrollable violence. Number 2. During a midnight screening of The Dark Knight Rises on July 20th, 2012 at the Century 16 Multiplex in Aurora, Colorado, 24-year-old James Holmes entered Theater 9 through an emergency exit. 30 minutes into the film, the masked assailant, clad in protective gear, threw smoke grenades to obscure vision before opening fire with multiple weapons, including a 12-gauge Remington 870, a Smith & Wesson M&P 15, and a .40 caliber Glock 22. The attack resulted in 76 bullets being discharged, ending the lives of 12 moviegoers and severely wounding 70 others. Stunned police apprehended Holmes at the scene, where he reportedly claimed to be the Joker and warned of booby traps at his apartment. Explosive squads later found a large cache of explosive devices connected to tripwires, which would have demolished the apartment and the surrounding units had they been set off. In the 60 days prior, Holmes purchased 4 firearms and 6,000 rounds of ammunition, highlighting the premeditated nature of the crime. Following a 2-year investigation and trial that ended on August 7, 2015, Holmes avoided the death penalty due to the jury's failure to reach a unanimous decision. Instead, he received 12 life sentences, plus 3,318 years in prison without the possibility of parole for what was considered the most fatal U.S. firearm-related event at the time. Number 1. Joanne Denny, raised in Harpenden with aspirations of becoming a lawyer, began skipping school and engaging in substance abuse as a teenager, eventually running off with an older man, John Traynor, with whom she had children in Milton Keyes. Their relationship grew tumultuous due to her multiple affairs, frequent absences, and escalating violence, including carrying a dagger and expressing a desire to kill. Traynor fled with their children in 2009, leading to Denny's involvement with the criminal justice and mental health systems. Diagnosed in 2012 with antisocial personality disorder and other psychiatric disorders, Denny became violent and unpredictable. In a 10-day homicidal spree from March 19th to the 29th, 2013, she fatally stabbed 3 men in Peterborough. Property developer Kevin Lee, with whom she was romantically involved, Polish national Lukas Slaboszewski, and her housemate, John Chapman. Dubbed the Ditch Slayer, Denny was arrested on April 2, 2013, and found guilty that November. In addition to the 3 murders, she faced 2 attempted homicide charges for randomly attacking 2 men in Hereford, crimes she described as moreish and fun. She pleaded guilty to all charges, admitting she specifically targeted men and allegedly intended to end the lives of at least 9 for entertainment. Despite her mental disorders, Denny was sentenced to a whole life order at the Old Bailey, ensuring she will never be released, making her the 3rd woman in the UK to receive this sentence. She's currently incarcerated at Low Newtown Prison. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to hit that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But my name is Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.